Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I am H.A. Conrad, here as always with my intrepid, marvelous, and awesome co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, how you doing?
I tried to build you up. You just let me down there. Come on, sound psyched.
I said, hey, how you doing?
Yeah. Just trying to be, like, understated, I guess.
You know, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling pretty amped. Pretty great.
Me too.
Am I selling it?
Yeah. It's good. And
it's the end of a long day.
I know we don't want to talk about the weather, but is it now below 107 there? Because I was feeling for you, man.
Oh yeah, we're good. We're back in. Today was a high of 82. We can totally handle that.
That's pretty good.
So I'm back in my happy place.
Sweet. So we don't have too much in the way of news today, but we have like one item that is kind of cool to talk about. And there's also a podcast, not our podcast, but a very good podcast about this that was up about this particular subject about a year ago. So we got that. We'll get into that in a second. And then we are going to be chatting about Fear the Walking Dead, Season 3, Episode 5, Burning in the Water, Drowning in the Flame. And a lot to talk about in this particular episode. So,
yeah, this is it's a dense one, isn't it?
Yeah. But before we get into that, let's talk about this news article that you found.
Well, apparently it's an old story that I just didn't know has already been covered, but it's a couple people picked it up that there's this Lone Star tick that they're calling the reverse zombie because it's making people allergic to red meat. And I guess it can actually even go so far as to give you anaphylactic shock on consumption of red meat. But I think that's an extreme case. But so I think, as we always love to talk about crazy insects and weird stuff that's making people act odd or have strange reactions. Honestly, I still kind of have nightmares about that one thing we talked about from Texas that was like the brain slug or something.
Ooh, the amoeba, you mean?
Yeah, the one you go swimming in a certain lake, and then I think a child actually died from that. It still haunts me to this day.
Yeah, lots of people die from that. They just don't talk about it all that often. It's just don't go swimming in fresh water, man.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a broad stroke.
Well, you can swim in swimming pools. You just swim in the pools with the chlorine.
Yeah, I mean, true. I have occasionally gone swimming in fresh water, but like Michigan, where you're more likely to just get E. coli. So
and other things.
That's your.
But no, this particular. So the reason why, and if you listen to this podcast, it's a Radiolab episode from a little while ago, and basically, the woman that they're following in this story is talking about this whole thing. And what happens is that there's a coating that's sort of like a sugar that the tick has when it bites you that your immune system reacts to. And it's the same like alpha protein or sugar that's like in meat. So your body starts behaving as if meat is an invader, and so basically it releases the hounds, and so you have this really serious reaction. The good news is, though, and based upon what they were saying, is that it's not permanent, but it can take a really long time for it to kind of wane. But part of how they figured this out was that when she had initially gone to the doctor told her she was totally insane, because who would be allergic to red meat, right? And then she did more research, and she actually did go into shock, like, because she tried to test it on herself. It's still very entertaining to listen to this, so you should do it.
Okay.
But the person who kind of figured out what was going on was an expert on the Lone Star tick, and realized when looking at a heat map that it was only this whole meat allergy thing was only happening in places where the Lone Star tick was. So kind of fascinating, disturbing. So do your checks for those tick bites, folks. It was really disturbing to me since she was in New York, this woman they're following. I'm like, So,
Yeah, ticks are nasty.
Are-
There's no such thing as a good tick.
are you itchy right now? I'm like suddenly feeling like, there's ticks all over me. But yeah, so that's our news story for the day. One really disturbing little story to leave you with before we get into our review. So, Fear the Walking Dead. I spent another, episode watching this on the train with similar. I should just start I wish I had like a recorder so that I could record the people around me that catch like little glimpses of this on the train. It's kind of good. But it was enjoyable nonetheless. Do you want to hop in?
I think you enjoy the discomfort you cause people.
Only, it's only because this has happened a few times, including with the woman last week. It's people that like react and they're like, oh my God, how horrible. And then they like continue to watch. So it's like, they're not being forced to watch it. And I'm not trying to subject people to this. But maybe this is just, part of the public transport thing, I guess.
I thought the unspoken law in New York was that you stay out of other people's business and don't make eye contact and don't get in personal space and definitely don't watch what other people are doing on their various devices.
Oh, please.
Is that not a thing?
That is
No?
definitely not a thing. People are into each other's business all the time. All the time.
Okay.
And what I don't mind, it's weird. I don't really mind people watching a show I'm watching, although sometimes if there's like kids on the train or something like that, I tend to not watch any of this stuff just because I think it's like that's kind of uncool because parents can't help the fact that they're on the train with their toddler or whatever.
Yeah.
But I really, really dislike people reading over my shoulder. It just that to me is more invasive somehow than watching something, and I don't know why.
Interesting. I think you should probably just start carrying like a knife or something and rocking back and forth while you watch it, and then you'll have a lot more privacy. Also, you could, I don't know. Yeah, talk to yourself more. Don't take showers, whatever it takes.
Actually, you know what? One of the cooler things that has happened, like when I am watching this, teenagers tend to talk to me when I'm watching it and they want to talk to me about the show, which I think is kind of cool. They're just like, oh my God. Or they are fans of the show. Not so much Fear the Walking Dead, more when I'm watching Walking Dead. I'm not finding too many people that are like actually watching this show right now. But The Walking Dead, I will definitely get people, and they just want to talk about it, which I think is kind of nice, and I don't mind that at all. I think that's that's kind of a nice little like zombie community that we have gathered around ourselves, So, but in any case, who is the writer and who is the director of this shindig?
Yeah, so we got Daniel Stamm, a German director, matched up with Suzanne Heathcote as the writer. And this episode came out on June 25th. And the title is a reference to an author that they talk about in the episode who I've honestly, English major me, has never heard of this guy.
Bukowski?
So, yeah, I don't know.
Really?
Never heard of this guy. I know you were going to do that because this is your favorite thing to do is, oh, you haven't heard of? But yeah, I have never heard of this guy.
Well, no, I thought more you would know of him just because, he seems like not the kind of person that you would know about, but he seems like it's a little bit of a, like, I don't know, he's like a misanthrope, and he was, kind of like one of those, like, alcoholic, weird dudes that would get really upset about lots of stuff. I don't know. He just seems to have like this weird little... I feel like he was very popular at the time when we were going to school.
Yeah. Well, unless I completely missed the assignment, never was something that I had to read for part of my major, or my degree. And I understand that he's kind of a feminist author, although he's also, like you said, he's kind of cynical about society and a general grumpy pants.
Yeah, he's kind of grumpy. He also, what you may or may not know is that there's actually a bar in Boston, two of them, in fact. I don't know if they're still open, but both called Bukowski, which had Bukowski quotes all over the wall and lots of beer. Some really tasty,
No.
yeah, lots of tasty,
I've never heard of
tasty
this.
beers and hot dogs. Two of my favorite things.
It's so random. Not that those are your favorite things.
Know that there was like a bar called Bukowski.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So this episode is complicated. We got a whole slew of overlapping storylines. We got Alicia and Jake. These are not in order of appearance, but Alicia and Jake. We got Troy and Maddie and the patrol. We got Jeremiah, Nick, and Luciana. And we got Strand and Salazar. All parallel subplots, basically. And yeah, between that many, that is actually like a real task to keep up with. And I guess, the Salazar Strand or the Maddie storylines are probably the most engaging. They have action, they have zombies. The others are more like feelings and talking. So those are the ones that I connected better with. Where did you land?
I think that there were parts of this. I felt like they almost were trying to fit a little too much into this myself. I don't know how you felt about it, but I think that they could have cut one of these little storylines and it dealt with it later. But maybe that was the point of them trying to sort of piece these things off. I think I connected probably the most with the Nick Luciana storyline and the auto one. And then I was most interested in what was happening with the Madison Troy storyline.
Yeah, there was some interesting stuff going on in there, and not only because they introduced a whole new group of people and a faction,
right?
And really drives forward the story of Brokejaw Ranch in a way that we
have not seen.
We weren't expecting necessarily.
The Daniel Strand storyline, I feel like they wasted an opportunity there, but
In what way?
I just felt like how amazing was that last episode. We haven't seen a ton of Strand. We just see kind of him being his, most Strand self. And I feel like they could have dealt with this in a little bit of a better way without doing what they did. I felt like they could have had the conflict or the confrontation between Strand and Daniel without even going to the hotel.
Yeah, but now we've got a real pickle for Strand by the end of the episode. It's frustrating to watch Strand self-destruct in this episode because it's basically what he does. Maybe he feels like he's between a rock and a hard place and he's already lied to Salazar. But I think we also all know, and they both know, that Salazar knows that Strand is lying to him.
Well, right.
So,
that's my point.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense why he persists for no reason until Salazar's just like, oh, screw you. Good luck with these zombies,
Yeah. But I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with the Clark family, that we have seen. And so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to move on from Salazar and Daniel only because I think that that's a boring thing that they could have done better with. With the Clark family, they're each kind of trying to find their own way in this new community. It's unclear whether they have a plan like that. And it seems to me, just based upon Madison says flat out, because Nick doesn't want her to go on this outing, but she's basically like, the more we learn about them, the better. And she's basically saying this to both of her kids. And I feel like maybe they took that as marching orders. So part of me is wondering if some of the coziness we're seeing with Alicia and Jake and with Nick and Jeremiah are that they are trying to do the same thing that Madison is doing. And so it's making me question their actual commitment to this community, which we should be suspicious. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And then Madison is in some ways proving herself, because she's got to prove herself to this group of people, and they are skeptical. So she's with the group of men that are going out as basically a hunting party to see what happened. Like who were the people that shot down the chopper, and then what happened to the rescue party or the group that had gone after them. So, and then we've got, the whole Luciana aspect of the Nick Jeremiah thing.
Well, how did you feel about the way that was resolved? It was kind of... It didn't feel great to me.
No.
I mean, I guess it was a little bit like... Nick is trying to drive this thing forward, and he knows that she's not on board, so it's kind of obvious that that's going to happen. And I feel like the dynamic between the two of them is not really... They're not really equals. Like, the Colonia, she was kind of his boss.
Right. And I mean, this is the tragedy of this character, in my opinion, and what they've been doing with her here. We're not seeing... I mean, she has always had... She's always done what she wants to do. She is a very strong person. We haven't seen a ton of that here, but, we also haven't seen a ton of dialogue from her, or between her and Nick. And I feel like a lot of what is going on between the two of them, they haven't done a great job about writing, like, between these two characters, like, just unraveling what's going on between them. They really, she says a lot of these weird half things about not wanting to stay and not whatever. And I mean, you can understand why she might not want to stay, because she was tortured and almost killed by all these people. So she's not necessarily going to be feeling secure. But Nick also isn't explaining to her why he wants to stay. And I'm not fully buying his buy-in to Jeremiah Otto's way of life. It happened a little too easily, which is why I'm a little bit suspect about his motivation. We've seen Nick
after he was so invested in the Colonia, and then these guys shoot up those people.
Right. I feel like he may be playing the long game, and we've also seen that Nick can do that, and he is very adaptable. Sometimes he does stupid stuff, but he is very adaptable in these communities and figuring out who has the power, who he should be currying favor with. He doesn't always do it in a smart way, but in this case, he knows what he's doing, I think, with Jeremiah Otto. He makes a big deal of going to help clean up the house of the older couple that we saw in the cold open, who die in a super horrible way, but also in a super irresponsible way for people that are on a compound like this. So, and what I'm talking about is that there's the older couple we saw all dancing in the last episode, and the woman in the couple has turned into a walker, and instead of just killing her, we're treated to a really disturbing scene where she has false teeth, so she's trying to bite him and she can't, which is totally disgusting. Were you grossed out by that?
No, because I have children.
Anyway.
My daughter tries to bite me all the time, and she doesn't have, well, now she does have teeth, so actually it's turned a corner.
Yeah, so it's painful now.
Yeah.
But he does this weird, like, stacked up head thing where he's going to shoot them both in the head. I just don't think he would have done this. Like, I think he sounds like he was very responsible, and so basically it causes this kerosene lamp to go over and everything goes on fire, and they die in flames. But they've both been shot through the head, so it doesn't matter. And I feel like Nick's cleaning up at this cabin, and it just feels so contrived. And I don't know that Jeremiah is totally buying into it, but he seems like he is.
Yeah. It's almost like Nick is doing it to buy into Jeremiah's affection, because these people were important to that family.
Yep.
And that's something that Alicia also learns and uses to get into Jake's pants.
Yep. And they do, it's interesting because they're both kind of doing the same thing, although Alicia actually has sex. And so she's... And
they might also both be doing it accidentally and for sincere reasons. Alicia, I think, really does just want to connect with someone. I think this is the first person she talked to that one guy on the radio, but they the pirate, but they never actually connected.
Right.
Right. They just they had an emotional tryst, but never consummated. Whereas this is the first time she has hooked up with someone, I think.
Yeah, since her boyfriend from the very first season.
Who died in episode 2 or
and I think, you know, with the Clarks, I don't think they're fully trusting, but I do think that they solidly believe in whatever they're shilling here, and they're shilling this community. They're definitely, you know, I don't think Jake has as many walls up, and he's pretty psyched that Alicia wants to have sex with him. But he seems very much in the sort of missionary position here, where he's trying to bring Alicia over to his way of thinking, though it's not quite what his dad thinks. And so we have seen this all along, where Jake is espousing one set of beliefs, which doesn't seem to quite match up with his dad's and his brother's beliefs, which is interesting, because then the question is, what is the power dynamic, and what happens once Otto is gone, or will there be some kind of a conflict there?
Well, there's dude.
They're
the way that they're
building it
setting
up,
this up,
I mean,
Jeremiah is gonna die, and then there's gonna be a power vacuum. Yep. Yeah, it's plain as day.
Yep, and I also think Jake is, to me, he's on the short list for death. But
yeah, as we've already discussed. Although now that he's having sex with the main cast member, perhaps he'll live forever. It's hard to say.
I don't know. He's talking about poetry and love. Those people never survive.
You're right. There's a scene related to the two of their storyline where Alicia is standing on a cliff, and we're like, oh, should she just kill herself? I thought that was kind of a nasty trick.
Yep, I knew what she was doing.
You knew.
Yep.
All along. Nothing gets past HA. I, however, was like, come on, no, oh, okay, just water. No big deal.
Well, it was just
She's
water.
Fine. Everything's
It was
fine.
also pretty stupid, nonetheless, because you don't know how deep that is. So.
And she was in all of her clothes.
I know. And you don't know what walkers might be floating around there.
In theory, I think this is a safe lake because they were down there skipping stones earlier. But yeah, very strange. So Jake is trying to convince her that there's something worth living for. It's one of these sort of scenes. Wait, who else has been having this crisis? Were we talking about this in The Walking Dead? Yeah, it was basically the same thing that Glenn was doing with Enid.
Oh yeah, totally.
In the main show, in a way, right? Except slightly less teenage angsty. Alicia's kind of just more well, what's the point of poetry or art or anything like that anymore? This is the apocalypse. They actually say this is the apocalypse a bunch of times in this episode. You notice that? That was kind of weird. It's not something that people tend to throw around on the show.
Right.
It's kind of odd.
Well, I think they're making, religious observations, and that's been pretty big in Fear the Walking Dead. The religious themes have been in pretty much every episode, especially this season. So I think that's part of why they're doing that. But yeah, and then as part of our third I know there's 4 groups, but our third group of the Clarks, we've also got Madison with her group of people, and she's definitely...
There's a few different elements to this, right? There's a lot of this psychological stuff between her and Troy.
Yep.
Throughout all these scenes. When they're in the truck, she's talking to him about the game that he's playing and turning up his crazy death metal instead of turning it off. I feel like she's actually totally Freuding his face.
Oh yeah, and everybody else in the group is kind of watching it, and they're definitely trying to size her up, but
yeah, well, the big beard guy Coop even is kind of threatening her at the beginning before they set off, but she gives as good as she gets in that scene, which I really enjoyed. It was also nice that somebody other than Troy got some speaking lines.
Yeah, right.
This episode gave us a few of the other, utility people on the base, these on the compound rather, like these militiamen. We got some characters out of this sequence, which was a relief. Like, they haven't really given anybody other than a couple of jerks and Alicia's drinking buddies, a lot of lines. It was nice to get some more people introduced.
Right, but in their hero's journey along the way, for no apparent reason, Troy
Yeah.
stops to see this weird prison bus that's there, and is like, we should clean this up. And Madison, playing the mind game, supports him in this. There's a very silly scene where they're like kind of like taking out the prisoners. Troy is very clear that there shouldn't be guns. There's some bow and arrow action, but I feel like Madison does not really like act to the level that we know that she's capable of here, because she gets taken pretty easily and walks right into this weird little cabal of walkers. And then
and there's a whole bunch of other people, militia guys, who aren't.
Yeah.
I don't know why she's so far ahead, I guess.
Right. And then Coop...
She didn't need to be that stuck in.
And then Coop saves her life, and then he's like, yeah, you got what it takes. And he wasn't being sarcastic, so I don't really understand what was going on there, but I felt like she was pretty lame.
It's just because she managed to stab that one zombie in the eye with a baton that she, like, took off another person. Like, that was it. She had one cool move, even though she would have totally died if it wasn't for Coop.
Yeah.
Because she had that one move. He's like, no, you are okay.
Right.
Cobra Kai accepts you. This is a scene where Troy is actually pretty terrifyingly good at melee.
Yep.
Like, he's got himself a machete and a knife. He's dual wielding. And even though he's doing a lot of really unnecessary body stabbing,
he's good.
There's no practical reason to body stab a zombie. But he's like using it almost like a fork while he cuts off the last one he kills. He like cuts off both of its arms and then stabs it in the head. Like, wow, this is some next level stuff. So I thought that was a good showcase of him actually being someone worth fearing. We already know he's a psycho, but we didn't know that he was actually a pretty capable fighter, because all we've seen him is get a spoon in his eye so far.
Well, right, and then doesn't that then make you wonder how he managed to get a spoon in his eye? If he's this...
He let someone put a spoon in his eye.
Well, if he's this good, I don't know. Like...
Well, Maddie and Alicia are that much better, or are also pretty good. I don't know. But yeah, that does raise some questions. But then, yes, they do move on from the school bus, or the prison bus, rather. Another thing about the prison bus, did it seem like that had just happened?
Yeah, which is that was the one thing I have it in my notes. What was it doing there? And they hadn't discovered this before. It must be pretty close to the camp, and this is part of, like, ostensibly why they're gonna clean this up, because Troy's like, oh, they'll wander and get close to the compound. And so where have they been this whole time is the question.
And there's a bunch of zombies just
wandering
shuffling around the school bus, or the bus, instead of, like, spreading out. So it seems like, and their wounds look pretty fresh. Of course, we're still early on in zombies aren't looking super worn out yet, like they are in the main show. But yeah, it's like this. What did this happen, like 2 days ago, or like earlier this day? And why are these guys still in manacles and stuff?
I wonder if there will be like a webisode or something about the prison bus. Who knows?
No, that would be great. I'd love to find out more about them. But yeah, and then from that kind of unlikely scene, but although it is cool action scene, we move on to the helicopter crash site where inexplicably the helicopter's been moved.
Yeah, and it looks like tracks have like been dragged or something, and they're all like, okay, now we got to go find it. And Madison is pretty blank, and she's like, I didn't know I would be as affected by that, or something like that. And she and Troy have this like thing, and he's just like, gotta leave it behind. And she gets her jabs in and always brings up his mom, so she's definitely playing that card hard. But they end up, and this is to me the worst part. I don't know, we'll see what happens, but this is just pretty lame and lazy writing, but okay. So they show up, and they seem somewhat familiar with this place that they show up. It's another compound. It's empty, and they see some of their own trucks, their vehicles there with blood on them. And then they're like, oh, did you smell something? And you know what? Probably they would have smelled a huge pile of burning bodies earlier than that, right? Like,
yeah.
it's just, that was kind of lazy writing. And then they come across this man that's like just spouting gibberish, and they know him. And the most disgusting thing in the world is that there's this crow basically pecking at his brain because, like, part of his head has been taken off a little bit.
Yeah, it's like the most intense scalping you've ever seen, because
it's
actually
really,
his skull has been removed, or parts of it.
It's gross, and
it's this the director, Daniel Stamm, German guy, has a lot of horror in his background, so this felt like maybe a horror director, not necessarily a zombie or a post-apocalyptic director, kind of letting his passion get the better of him with this scene, because it was just like, I'm sorry, what?
I know.
This is like some evil doctor, brain experiment stuff that we don't really delve into on this show, and there's no need for it. It was unsettling, but in a way that was not this show.
Right. Then who appears on the scene but the people responsible for this? Oh, and look, it's Native Americans. And I have to say, I don't know about this storyline, but there is a lot of rhetoric thrown around about, the Ottos being on their land and that they can't steal land anymore, and all this kind of stuff that is so tropey, and like, I don't know. I was like, oh no, are we really going into cowboys and Indians territory? Like, this is pretty lame. I don't know. What was your feeling about it?
Not super psyched, yeah. Any of this, like, semi-organized human versus human stuff doesn't make a lot of sense when they're faced with the zombie apocalypse.
Right.
And I'm guessing that land is actually pretty damn accessible these days, especially in, like, Central Texas or wherever they are, South Texas, I guess. There's got to be plenty of land to go around because most of the people are dead. And if you have time to, like, have an army of people stake out an outpost, I don't know, like, what about the undead? Why aren't the undead playing into this scenario at all?
Well, right. And, I mean, there's got to be enough resources, like, for you to stay on your side and them to stay on their side. And they like Troy knows this person. Like, he knows him by name. What does he call him? Like, Walker,
of all things. Yeah.
And, he's like, you're dead. And it's like, dude, you're surrounded by people. I don't know that I'd be throwing around such things. And we do see in this back and forth that Madison holds power, and she's respected, at least in this way, more so than Troy is. But it's also like, you are the group at a disadvantage. You showed up here at this ranch. You just fly up with nobody, like, not even like cautious to no amount of cautiousness shown. You get out and you get ambushed, and they're surrounded by everybody. They do not have any leverage here. And Walker basically tells them to take their shoes off and to walk back, and to tell Otto that he wants his land back. And that's fine, but I don't know that you're going to be talking back to this guy after you just saw that he had this dude, like, set up on a chair getting his brain eaten by a crow. Like, you have no advantage here. He's taking your weapons. He's doing all this stuff to you. You keep your mouth shut and you get out of there. Oh, the Luciana Nick thing. There isn't a ton of talking between them.
Although it's the most we've seen of her and heard from her since the season started, because now she's up on her feet. She's moving around. She's part of she's like in the tent with them, or in their hut with them when the fire starts at the very beginning of the episode. So she's back at it, but she is apparently like this great source of tension between Nick and Jeremiah, among other things.
Right. Well, and Jeremiah has, like, Nick thinks it's a racist thing, and Jeremiah's like, oh no, it's not that, but you kind of feel like it probably still is. At least I do. And basically Jeremiah says no, because she can't get over what happened to her. on basically what they did to her. And then you're like, well, then why did Nick and why did Madison and Alicia? And if you think for a second that Jeremiah totally trusts them, oh, no, he does not. But I just feel like she was such a powerful character in the last season that I'm definitely disappointed now that she's up and walking that they still didn't have her say a lot. So they have Nick, kind of doing this weird romantic thing where he's bringing her to the old couple's cabin and talking to her about staying. And I would totally understand this more if he let her in on what his plans were. But he doesn't. And then you have to be like, oh, does he really want to stay?
I think it's clear that he wants to stay because he's talking to her about like how great it could be here if they let it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, all the time he's spending with Jeremiah and the fact that he relates to her, that he knows stuff because he's been talking to Otto, and she gives him a look that's like, oh, yeah, it's over.
Yeah, the minute she gives him that look, it's done for. But, she does get a nice, like, little walk-off with, like, looking pretty cool with her little, like, blanket on her head and stuff and about to scale the fence with her cool gun. So... at least she gets a cool exit, but...
I wonder how she got off the compound.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or if they just let people come and go. Maybe they do.
But part of me was still thinking that, even up until that point, I was still thinking that Nick was playing, like, the long con.
Yeah, this episode is clearly not as good as the last one, I think, because the last one, the Salazar episode, was more focused. And it was more of a story arc. And this one is 4 stories. And it's impossible to keep that kind of focus, but... it does move some stuff forward now. Lucy's out in the wind with Ophelia, with Strand. We don't know where the hell Strand's going to appear next. He was running off back into the hotel, sort of, last time we saw him. And Salazar's driving away, and we don't know where he's going to go. Maybe he'll go back to the dam. Maybe he's just going to drive the roads of Mexico until he finds Ophelia.
Well, the
weird thing about...
didn't it bother you a little bit, though, that he didn't get, like, more info from Strand? Like, what direction did she go in? Or, like, you know what I mean?
Well, nobody saw her leave. Like, nobody knows what direction she went in.
True.
Like, that's the truth, right? Like, Alicia comes out of the shower, and Ophelia's gone. Yeah. And they're like, where's our truck? Oh, we don't know where the truck is? Oh, we have no idea what's going on here.
All right.
I think she drove away while Maddie and Strand were getting hammered in the hotel bar.
Oh, that's right.
So nobody has any idea what's going on. Yeah. But the thing about Lucy separating from Nick is nobody still really knows about her. So if Strand and Salazar or Ophelia run into Lucy, they're not going to know that we might find that this show might make some way of them hooking up and becoming friends. But other than the Clarks, she's a stranger. Mm-hmm. So... the odds of it's just all of these disparate parts of the episode of the season right now. It's making it more and more unlikely, and the show has already done some unlikely like reunions, like Travis showing up at the hotel,
true,
or finding Nick at the Colonia. I mean, granted, they try to write it in like, yeah, we found that there was a white guy with greasy hair selling drugs from the Colonia to the drug dealers, and Travis saw the lights on the hotel. But these are people separated by dozens, if not hundreds of miles in an apocalypse where it's increasingly difficult to travel, and getting this ensemble back together at this point, every time they split them up, it's just more and more unlikely, So I guess that's kind of where how I'm starting to feel about it. Is as long as they keep everybody separated, it's hurting the show's chances for me to believe it.
I think that they will be bringing them all together. They're going to bring the band back together again.
I know they are. That's my beef. There's no way they're going to have like 2 separate shows from here on out.
No, of course not. I feel like they're going to do something with that water, the dam and like the Native Americans and possibly the people at the compound. I feel like that may be a bone of contention. I feel like that may be where it all comes together.
The dam?
Yep. Or
Like,
or since we know that Ophelia is somewhere around here, we just don't know what's happened to her yet. Maybe that's the impetus for them to get off. Maybe she knows more about the Ottos, and so she takes the Clarks out of there, and they go in search. Who knows?
things are a lot easier to understand in Mexico, where it's like the normal people are all really nice to each other, and then there's some evil people who are dicks, but they're really clearly dicks. Like they're banditos, or they're evil municipal presidents who take over dams but still wear suits after the zombie apocalypse. But in the United States, things are much more complicated with like land rights and racism, and it's impossible to know who's good and who's bad. So if I were anybody, I'd be like, hey, you know what? Let's go back to Mexico. We knew where we stood when we were there.
Yep. And things are a little bit more spread out too. So you got that going on. I don't know. I do think that this show has done better, and we just saw what it could do with the Salazar storyline. And I know that they have to at some point bring these people together, and that's kind of where we're diving into here. And it's hard to do that when you have so many different characters running around doing crazy things, to spend much time with each of them. But I do feel like if the story was more focused on a couple of them, or basically had some of them together a little bit longer, it would go a long way to making me like it more. And the only reason why I say that is because the Salazar storyline was just so enjoyable to watch.
Oh yeah.
And had such a great little arc and resolution, and it was really excellent. And in fact, I'm a little bit more interested to learn about some of the people at the dam than I am to learn about the people at this compound. So I don't know. We'll see. But in any case, I am enjoying watching it. Because I was a little frustrated by this episode, I definitely had that feeling like, oh man, I wish there was the next episode to see that it got better or something like that. So
yeah, you want to kind of get this slightly bad taste out of your mouth right away.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I would also watch a spin-off show just about Gretchen.
Yeah, definitely. She's really weird.
Just getting wasted to the apocalypse, man. That's our whole game plan. So,
because in the middle of the apocalypse, so-and-so has time to, like, man the still. It's like, what?
It's because they never leave the compound. Yeah. I have a feeling, you know what, I kind of want to watch. They haven't really established enough of the personalities inside the compound yet, but I'm hoping that we get to meet a few more people, and then they all get murdered somehow. Not Gretchen necessarily, but I have a feeling she's probably going to go because she has broken the prime law of horror.
Yep. One last thing we should talk about is the whole Maddie Troy power struggle.
Towards the end of the episode.
Yep.
Yeah. I think she pushes him a little too far with her, and gets a little too transparent with the fact that she's been playing head games with him.
Yep. And
she pays a bit of a price for that.
Well, not that much of a price. She gets a knife to the throat, and this is seen
talks her way out of it.
Sort of, not really, but I guess.
Yeah, you're better than this. Maybe that's all it takes.
But that's, I guess we'll see what happens next. But she basically embarrassed him in front of the men because she wasn't subtle about it. She was very vocal about it. And she could have been a little more subtle about it, but she made it very clear where she stood. And, I mean, what she really did was emasculate him. And then he ended up having to kind of, like, eat his words a little bit and make it seem like he was doing it, but he just seemed like a spoiled little kid, and he knew it. So we'll see what happens with him next, but I don't know that I'd be sleeping in the dark around that dude.
No, and especially when I don't remember the dude's name, but the more complainy of the militia guys with the smaller beard.
I don't know
he's just watching
the complainy guy, whatever his name is.
Complainy guy. It's like, oh, my feet hurt. Oh. But when you pan to his face and he's just watching what had just happened, where Troy was holding the knife to her throat, and then instead of any kind of reaction, he just turns around and like sleeps facing the other way. I was like, oh man, she's not in a good place.
Yeah.
So good luck, Maddie. I'm sure they'll be fine. What's the worst that can happen?
Yep. All right. So I
I
think,
mean, she's the Rick Grimes, so she's untouchable, right?
yeah, except when, just a random walker pulls her under a bus. But
Or if she lands, 4 other movie contracts and then is just like, shoot me off a helicopter after I have a really badass, zombie fighting scene.
oh, Travis. Anyway, well, I mean, that about wraps it up for me. Did you have any other things to add?
Only that Talking Dead had Snooki as a guest.
Really?
Yeah. Also, the actors who play Luciana and Jake, and I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you do, but Troy and Jake, the actors who play both of them, are both Brits.
Yes, I did know that. I think you had told me that, though. I did not know that.
I might have already mentioned it. It's nuts how many English people there are on this show now, or like non-Americans. It's basically Kim Dickens and Strand.
All right.
I mean, and Dayton Callie.
Oh, yeah.
He's American, but gosh darn, like Alicia Debenham Carey is Australian. Troy and Jake are both Brits. Nick is British.
I always forget.
Luciana's
I always
from Cuba.
forget that Nick is British.
Because he actually has a really good accent. Jake's is not that.
No, he
great.
slips a little bit.
He slips a fair amount, but I mean it's close enough. And honestly, I've never really felt like Lenny, the guy who plays Morgan, I've never really thought that his accent was impeccable either.
No, you're right.
But it's good enough. We're getting to critical mass of British and Australians, but it's all good. They're they're like new faces that we're not familiar with too, so it actually kind of works in a way.
Yeah. So.
But however, yeah, we've beaten this dead horse. It was a decent episode. It just wasn't as good. It was a tough act to follow. Episode 4 was so strong that this was going to be a tough one.
True. But I'm in it. The last one gave it some credibility that it did not have before, so I'll give them a pass on this one, and let's hope for the best for the next one. I'm really hoping Ophelia makes an appearance soon.
Good grief, yeah. They just need to tighten it up a bit. Like, don't try to do 4 stories in one episode.
It's just too
you only
much.
have 45 minutes.
But yeah. So we'd love to know what you have to say about this episode. So drop us a line at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can visit the site reanimatedpodcast.com, or you can tweet at us at reanimatedpcast. We'd love to know what you think about this particular episode. Definitely what you think about the last episode. So just give us a shout. Until next time, ciao.
All right, thanks for listening.